The marble steps of the federal court gleamed under a pale New York morning. Cameras clicked, voices murmured, then a shout ripped through the quiet. "Get out of here." The words cracked like a gavel. One officer's hand shot out, pressing against Naomi Ellis's face, pushing her back. A slap not brutal, but sharp enough to sting. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Her arms stayed folded, her beige coat barely moving in the cold wind. Behind her, phones rose, screens lit up. People whispered. What did she do? The answer? Nothing. She'd simply walked through the wrong door, in the wrong skin, with too much calm. The lead officer barked again, his voice heavy with authority. "This entrance is for authorized personnel only." Naomi's tone was level, her voice low but steady. "Then check who I am first." That sentence, soft, restrained, carried more weight than the shouting ever could. Around them, the crowd stiffened. Someone began filming from the steps. A young man in a navy suit lifted his phone, eyes narrowing. The officer stepped closer, his breath harsh against her cheek. "You people think you can walk anywhere." Naomi met his gaze. "I can, and I just did." "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Naomi Ellis. She had come to the courthouse, alone, no entourage, no flashing lights, no press, just a black leather briefcase and the quiet power of someone who didn't need to prove anything. The irony? She wasn't even here to attend a trial. She was the trial. 2 more officers joined, flanking her sides. "Ma'am, step back. Ma'am, this area's restricted." Their tones weren't procedural, they were personal. Naomi didn't move. The camera shutters clicked like distant applause. A woman in the crowd gasped. "She's not resisting." The officer replied, louder than needed. "Then why won't she move?" "Because she didn't have to. Because she belonged there more than any of them." Naomi's mind flashed back. For a second, a younger version of herself, 22, wearing the same calm defiance as a law intern being told, "You can't stand here. This area's for attorneys." She had walked away that day. Not anymore. She straightened her collar, her eyes tracing the words carved into the stone arch above. United States District Federal Court. She spoke again, slow, deliberate. "You're making a mistake that will be replayed by millions." The officer scoffed. "You threatening me?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "No, I'm warning you." And for a heartbeat, the noise faded. Even the wind paused. The crowd felt it, something was shifting, something bigger than a confrontation. A balance tilting. One phone's red light blinked on. Another followed. The story had just begun. Naomi Ellis hadn't always commanded rooms with silence. That power was learned, carved from years of walking into spaces that questioned her right to breathe in them. This morning, she came prepared for it. She wore cream trousers, a crisp white blouse, and a long beige coat. Her hair was pinned high, her posture straight, her expression composed. To most, she looked like a woman with business to attend to. To those officers, she looked like an intrusion. She had parked 3 blocks away, refusing the reserved underground slot that bore her name. No driver, no badge, just herself. It was a ritual she practiced, stepping into the world without title or armor, testing whether equality was still an illusion. The courthouse plaza was alive with routine. Lawyers in tailored suits hurried past, interns clutched coffee cups, reporters clustered near the barriers. None of them noticed her at first, until the guards did. "Ma'am, ID," one said, hand raised like a gate. Naomi smiled faintly, reaching into her coat pocket. "Of course." Before she could hand it over, another officer stepped in, squinting. "That's a restricted corridor. You need clearance." "I have it." He laughed once, a hollow sound. "Sure you do." Her gaze didn't waver, then checked the list. But he didn't. He waved to his partner instead, muttering something under his breath, that tone. The same tone she'd heard at airports, banks, hotel receptions. The tone that said, "You don't fit the picture we expect." People began to slow their steps. curiosity turning to discomfort. Phones lifted again, subtle this time. Naomi stood still, calm amid the murmuring tide. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to see who would make it for her. 15 minutes earlier, in her downtown office, her assistant Cassandra had tried to stop her from coming alone. "Ma'am, it's a high-profile day. The mayor's team will be there. Let us coordinate." Naomi had only smiled. Justice doesn't recognize status. Let's see if security does. Now, facing 3 armed officers, she felt no fear, only prediction. The same pattern repeating in sharper suits. One of them pointed toward the marble steps. "Court officials only." End quote. Naomi replied evenly. "Exactly why I'm here." He frowned, confused. Meaning what? She didn't answer. She wanted him to say it. To complete the sentence hanging in the air. "You don't look like one." Behind them, the crowd was gathering. A group of law students, fresh from an ethics seminar, whispered and filmed. One of them muttered, "She's not backing down." Another said, "She shouldn't have to." And well, Naomi's eyes drifted upward again, catching the reflection of sunlight on the courthouse columns. For a moment, she thought of her father, a postal worker who once told her, "You can change the world, but they'll check your pockets first." He was right. They always checked the surface before the substance. The lead officer's voice hardened. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time." She interrupted softly. "Don't ask. Verify." The phrase landed heavy, deliberate. It wasn't defiance. It was law. And that law, the one she'd spent her life upholding, was about to turn on those who thought they owned it. From across the street, Cassandra watched from her car, phone already in hand, system already armed. Naomi had told her what to expect. A test of patience, a test of truth. And as the crowd pressed closer, unaware of who they were witnessing, the woman in beige adjusted her coat, glanced at the clock tower above, and murmured to herself, "Time to see if justice still remembers my name." The courthouse air had shifted. What began as a misunderstanding was now turning into a spectacle. 3 officers surrounded Naomi Ellis, forming a blue wall of suspicion around one calm woman. The marble echoed with clipped commands and the shuffle of boots. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice whispered, "They think she's trespassing." Another replied, "She looks too calm for that." Naomi's calm was the problem. It unnerved them. Authority feeds on obedience, not composure. "Ma'am, you've ignored a lawful directive," the senior officer barked, stepping closer. His nameplate read S. Harding, his tone, pure theater. "You're obstructing federal security protocol." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "You mean standing still?" A ripple of nervous laughter flickered through the onlookers. Even a few court clerks paused behind the glass doors to watch. Cameras rose higher, phones recording every frame. Harding's jaw tightened, his voice climbed an octave. "Ma'am, you will either cooperate, or we'll remove you." The word remove, not escort, not guide, cut through the morning like a blade. Naomi stayed silent, her face unreadable. She'd seen this playbook before: escalate, dominate, justify. They'd use her silence as evidence of guilt, so she gave them the one thing they couldn't handle: grace. "Officer," she said softly, "I'm asking again. Check my name." He snorted. "Lady, this isn't a game." Behind them, one officer whispered, "She said her name was Ellis, right?" The other shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Protocol says detain first." That was the real confession policy as a mask for prejudice. A sharp voice broke the tension. A courthouse aide, young, nervous, tried to speak up from the top of the stairs. "Sir, I think she's on the—" Harding snapped, "Stay out of it." The aide froze mid-sentence, retreating inside. Naomi caught his eye as he disappeared through the doors. He knows, she thought. Someone always does. Another officer, younger, uncertain, muttered, "We can just verify. It takes 30 seconds. But Harding cut him off again. "You questioning me now?" The crowd felt the crack. Authority was fracturing under its own arrogance. Naomi exhaled slowly. The sound barely audible, but it steadied her like prayer. She thought of the countless rooms where she'd been the only one. Boardrooms, conferences, panels, always proving she belonged. always giving more calm than she received respect. A gust of wind lifted the edges of her coat. It looked almost cinematic, like the universe had paused to frame her properly. "Last warning," Harding barked. "You can either step away, or I'll have you detained for obstruction." Naomi's voice was gentle, almost compassionate. "And I'll have you remembered for it." Someone in the back gasped. The third officer shifted uneasily. "Sir, we're being filmed," he whispered. Harding didn't care. Ego never does. He stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. "I don't care who's filming. You don't belong here." "I know." And there it was, the sentence that always found her. The universal key to every locked door. Naomi's reply came soft, precise, final. "Then that's your first mistake, assuming belonging is yours to give." The officer's grip tightened on her arm. The crowd stirred, phones flashing, voices rising. A reporter from a local station shouted, "Is this an arrest?" Another voice yelled, "She didn't do anything." The Marble Plaza was no longer calm. It was charged. The smell of tension, the click of phones, the metallic echo of power about to break. Naomi didn't resist. She just looked up at the flag fluttering above the courthouse and whispered, almost to herself, "You serve justice. I am justice." And somewhere in that crowd, a young man in a gray suit lowered his phone, realization dawning across his face. He knew who she was. But it was already too late. The moment had been set. The world was watching. At first, he just watched. Ethan Cole, Assistant District Attorney, 32, crisp suit. The kind of man who followed every rule in the book until the book started to burn in front of him. He'd been standing halfway up the courthouse steps, scrolling through his notes for that morning's hearing, when he heard the commotion below. At first, he assumed it was a protest. Then he saw her, the woman in beige, poised and unmoving, surrounded by 3 armed officers. Her calm didn't look like defiance. It looked like restraint, holding its breath. Something in that image tugged at his memory. The posture, the stillness. He'd seen it before, but where? "Sir, move back," one officer ordered the crowd. But no one did. Phones glowed like fireflies around them. The moment was being captured from every angle. Ethan adjusted his tie, scanning the officers' badges. Harding known for overreach. The younger one, Morales, clearly uneasy. And the woman, Naomi Ellis, that name echoed somewhere in his head, like a note from a song he couldn't place. Then it hit him. The Ellis Foundation, the law firm that had represented half the courthouse's most significant civil rights cases. Naomi Ellis, the CEO who funded pro bono defense for wrongly profiled defendants. He froze. Oh, God. Below him, Harding shoved a little harder this time, his voice rough. "Turn around and put your hands where I can see them." Naomi didn't move. "Officer," she said, her tone even. "You're seconds away from violating federal code." Ethan took one step forward. "Hey." The nearest guard raised a hand. "Sir, stay back. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" Ethan's voice cracked louder than he meant. "You're detaining a federal appointee." Heads turned. Harding snapped, "You're mistaken." Ethan pulled out his ID, flashing the district insignia. "I'm not. That's Judge Naomi Ellis, head of the State Judicial Reform Committee." End quote. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The phones rose higher. Naomi's eyes met his calm, steady, a flicker of gratitude hidden beneath composure. But Harding didn't back down. "You think I'm supposed to believe some story because she looks important?" Ethan's voice hardened. "Because she is important." For a moment, no one breathed. The marble steps swallowed the silence. Then a shout came from somewhere in the crowd, a student filming with trembling hands. "He's right! That's her! I saw her on the news last month." Another voice echoed. "She's the one who helped overturn that wrongful conviction." The tension flipped. The same crowd that had been watching with detached curiosity now leaned forward in outrage. Naomi didn't smile. She never gloated. She simply lowered her hands, not in surrender, but in quiet command. "You've done enough, officers. Stand down." But Harding, drunk on pride, took another step closer. "Don't order me around, lady. It's 90. Ethan's jaw tightened. You just ordered around a sitting judge. You better start rehearsing your apology. The young officer, Morales, paled. His radio crackled to life. Unit 6, hold position. Repeat, do not engage. Identification confirmed. Subject is cleared. Access level 1. Harding froze mid-breath. Naomi turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. Now you know who I am. The words weren't victory, they were verdict. Around them, murmurs swelled. The students were no longer silent. A woman whispered to her son, "That's what power looks like when it doesn't shout." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Naomi nodded once. "I've been worse, but they haven't." He understood instantly. This wasn't over. This was evidence, live, raw, undeniable. Harding muttered something about misunderstanding, but Naomi raised a hand to stop him. "Save it for the report. You'll need it." End quote. And as the officers' radios continued to buzz, the crowd began to part, giving her space not as a suspect, but as a symbol. The first witness had spoken, and justice had just found its voice. The plaza had gone still. The echo of Naomi's title, Judge Ellis, hung in the air like a verdict no one saw coming. But for Officer Harding, silence didn't mean surrender. His pride couldn't process it. Not in front of cameras, not in front of a black woman who hadn't flinched once. He stepped forward, jaw locked, voice sharp. "Judge or not, you still ignored a lawful order." Naomi's gaze met his, steady as glass. An unlawful order dressed as authority doesn't make it lawful. Her tone didn't rise, but the crowd reacted like a spark on gasoline. People murmured. Some applauded softly. Harding's ears reddened. "Ma'am," he hissed, "you're obstructing. I'm standing. Don't get clever with me. Then stop giving me material." End quote. Gasps and nervous laughter rippled through the air. Ethan Cole, the assistant DA, stepped closer but didn't interfere. He knew what she was doing, letting him hang himself with his own words. Then, without warning, Harding's hand shot out again, grabbing her by the shoulder, pushing her back toward the steps. It wasn't brutal, but it was enough. The crowd roared. Cameras surged forward. The sound of dozens of phones clicking became a storm. Naomi didn't fight. She simply froze, not from fear, but from memory. 15 years ago, she had been a law intern at this very courthouse. She'd shown up early one morning, arms full of files, excitement brighter than her pressed white shirt. A senior bailiff had stopped her right at those same marble steps. "Young lady, deliveries go through the side entrance," he'd said. When she explained she was a legal intern, he laughed. "Not dressed like that, you're not." Dudu stanted. She'd walked away that day, humiliated but silent, carrying the kind of wound that doesn't bleed, it hardens. Now, on the same steps, she looked into Harding's eyes and whispered, "I've met you before." He frowned. "What?" "Not you," she said softly. "Just your type." The cameras caught every syllable. Ethan stepped forward again, his voice low but urgent. "Officer, release her now." Harding's grip faltered. He looked around, realizing the crowd was no longer a crowd, it was an audience, and he was losing control of the script. Naomi brushed his hand off gently, almost politely. "You've done your part, my turn." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. One tap, one name. "Cassandra," she said calmly. "Activate internal log. Court Security Protocol 12. A clear, professional voice answered through the speaker. "Protocol 12 confirmed. Incident live recording initiated. Internal security notified." The words hit like thunder. Harding's face drained of color. The other officers took a step back. Even Ethan's breath caught. Naomi lifted the phone slightly, not to record, but to command. "Timestamp every phrase he used, especially you people." "Yes, ma'am," Cassandra replied. "Audio verified. Backup to federal cloud initiated." The crowd erupted. Someone shouted, "She's recording the system itself." Another voice yelled, "This is going viral." Naomi turned, her expression composed but electric. "I don't need viral," she said quietly. "I need visible." Harding stammered. This isn't protocol. She cut him off with surgical precision. No, officer. This is protocol. You just never imagined it could work both ways. A breeze swept through the plaza, carrying the weight of her words. Reporters pressed closer, sensing history unfolding. Ethan watched her, stunned. He'd seen judges issue rulings that changed laws, but never one who turned injustice into a live demonstration. Harding backed up, muttering excuses. I didn't mean to. Naomi's eyes were steel. You meant to assert control. You just forgot whose courtroom you were standing in. And as she said it, a low rumble of applause grew around her, hesitant at first, then louder, swelling into something uncontainable. Somewhere in the background, Cassandra's voice came again. Ma'am, federal oversight is online. Would you like to escalate to level 2? Naomi nodded once. Do it. Harding blinked, confused. What does that mean? It means, Naomi said softly, your actions are now under review by the same justice you thought you were protecting. She turned toward the courthouse doors, unshaken. Behind her, the cameras followed. The crowd parted, and the officer who had once believed he controlled the steps of justice now stood small, caught beneath the weight of his own lesson. The breaking point had come and gone, and Naomi Ellis was still standing exactly where she belonged. The first siren echoed faintly from somewhere downtown, but no one moved. The plaza felt suspended, like the air itself was waiting to see what Naomi would do next. She stood on the courthouse steps, centered in the chaos, phone in hand, eyes calm enough to make time hesitate. Ethan Cole whispered beside her, Judge Ellis, should we move inside? She shook her head. No. We move truth first. Harding still lingered a few feet away, face flushed with confusion and humiliation. His radio hissed with static, hold position, verification complete. But pride is a poor listener. He stepped forward again, voice low but edged. Ma'am, I don't know what you think you're doing. Naomi turned her gaze toward him, the same way one might glance at a fly before brushing it aside. I'm doing what you refuse to. I'm following the law. Then, calmly, she pressed another button on her phone. Cassandra, she said, initiate judicial override and alert the Ethics Bureau. Secure live relay to federal oversight. Cassandra's voice came crisp through the speaker, echoing across the marble. Confirmed. Real-time link established. Federal Ethics Bureau now monitoring. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised higher. Every second felt cinematic light glinting off badges, a hush spreading like reverence before a storm. Ethan looked stunned. You just brought the Bureau here. Naomi smiled faintly. No, Mr. Cole. I reminded them where here is. For the first time, Harding looked uncertain. He shifted his stance, eyes darting toward the courthouse doors. Look, Judge Ellis, this was all a misunderstanding. Naomi took one step closer. Her voice was almost gentle, a misunderstanding that involved assault, bias, and negligence, all broadcast live to every oversight office in this district. Tell me, officer, do you misunderstand often? He swallowed hard. The crowd murmured. Somewhere, a young woman whispered, she's turning the system inside out. Naomi didn't need to raise her voice. Her tone alone carried authority older than the building itself. You thought power was the right to command. It's not. It's the discipline to know when you've already lost it. Then, she did something no one expected. She walked past him not in anger, but in quiet grace, and stopped before the courthouse doors. Cassandra, activate entry authorization. A beep sounded. The heavy glass doors clicked open on their own. Security systems recognized her ID at a level none of the officers could access. The entire moment unfolded like a reversal of gravity. The woman they'd tried to keep out was the only one the building would let in. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, disbelief. Naomi paused, turning slightly toward the cameras now circling her. Every time justice is denied, it doesn't disappear, it just waits. And today, she looked back at Harding, it stopped waiting. End quote. Ethan stepped up beside her, lowering his voice. They're watching this in real time, ma'am. The Bureau, the district office, even the Attorney General's team. Good, she replied. They needed a front row seat, Harding's radio crackled again. Suspend action. Report to internal affairs immediately. He froze. Naomi's eyes didn't even meet his. You're dismissed, Officer Harding. The words weren't loud, yet they landed like judgment. He lowered his head, muttered something, and backed away into the dispersing crowd. The sound of his retreating boots against marble was almost poetic. Naomi turned to the other two officers, their faces pale. You may remain. You'll need to witness this. They nodded. No hesitation this time. Cassandra's voice returned through the phone. Ma'am, oversight confirmed. Visual feed stable. You have full command authority. 22. Naomi exhaled, the faintest trace of relief cutting through her composure. Then she stepped forward into the courthouse, each footstep deliberate, echoing like punctuation marks in a speech she hadn't yet delivered. Reporters swarmed the edges of the steps, calling her name. One shouted, Judge Ellis, what's next? Naomi glanced back over her shoulder, sunlight glinting across her coat. What's next? She said quietly. Accountability. End quote. And with that, she crossed the threshold, not as a woman entering a building but as justice returning to reclaim its house. The echo of her heels was the only sound that dared follow her inside. Marble floors, polished brass railings. The same courthouse that had once turned her away, now reflected her image, in every surface, quiet, poised, undeniable. Naomi Ellis walked through the atrium like someone reintroducing herself to a place that had forgotten its manners. Ethan trailed behind, keeping a careful distance. His phone buzzed with alerts. Local news outlets were already streaming the footage outside. The words, "Judge assaulted by police," scrolled across his screen. History wasn't waiting for official statements. It was happening live. Inside, security guards scrambled to attention. One of them, recognizing her immediately, stiffened. Your Honor, we didn't realize. Naomi raised a hand gently. Then start realizing. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Power, real power, doesn't announce itself. It arrives. Two senior clerks rushed down the corridor, whispering furiously to each other. One looked terrified. The bureau's on the line, they're demanding a statement. Naomi's reply was measured. They'll get one. In person. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole, would you accompany me to courtroom 3? Of course, he said. But Judge, what are you planning? She gave him a glance that could have silenced thunder, finishing what they started. As she entered the main chamber, cameras from the press already tipped off by Cassandra's live feed crowded near the door. Every flash illuminated the scene like lightning in slow motion. A woman who had been struck outside now walking calmly to the bench she commanded. At the center of the room stood the same symbol she'd chased her entire life, the bench itself, heavy oak, elevated, untouched, waiting. Naomi rested her hand on the polished surface, the way a soldier might touch a flag. Then, she looked up, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. You called me a trespasser, she said softly, as if still speaking to the echo of Officer Harding. You said I didn't belong. She paused, straightened her coat, and stepped behind the bench. Her next words came like judgment delivered by the earth itself. Yet here I am, where law begins, and where arrogance ends. Well, a murmur swept through the crowd. Reporters froze mid-sentence. Ethan exhaled, almost whispering, My God, she's taking the bench. Naomi sat down slowly, deliberately the first black woman in the state's history to preside over this very court. The weight of centuries seemed to settle and then lift all at once. Cassandra, she said, without looking up. Confirm recording. Active, ma'am. The bureau feed is still live. Naomi's tone sharpened. Good. Then let's make this official. Is 1:10. She adjusted the microphone. On record, I, Judge Naomi Ellis, presiding over the Federal Court of the Southern District, am opening a preliminary review into the unlawful detainment and assault that occurred on these steps, witnessed by hundreds, documented by thousands. The clerks looked at each other, uncertain whether to stand or sit. Ethan stared, mesmerized. This wasn't damage control, it was doctrine being rewritten. Naomi continued, her voice calm but resonant. Justice isn't a performance, it's a mirror. And today, that mirror cracked. A hush followed, the kind of silence that demands reverence. Even the clicking of cameras slowed, as though afraid to interrupt. She looked up toward the gallery, her gaze meeting every eye that dared hold it. "Power," she said, "doesn't come from the uniform, or the title, or the gavel. It comes from remembering who you serve, even when they don't look like you." The moment felt eternal. Ethan swallowed hard, whispering to himself, "That line alone will be in history books." Naomi rose slightly from her seat, placing one hand on the gavel before her. "Let the record show," she declared, "that dignity once denied has returned home." The gavel struck once, a single, thunderous note. Outside, the crowd erupted in applause that rolled through the glass doors and up into the chamber like a wave of release. Naomi Ellis didn't smile, she simply exhaled. The trial of perception was over. The verdict, written in silence and resolve, was already delivered. Justice had just taken her seat. The sound of the gavel still hung in the air when the courthouse doors burst open. Officers from Internal Affairs swept in, flanked by agents from the Federal Ethics Bureau. The crowd outside parted like a tide, the echo of applause fading into the hard rhythm of boots on marble. Ethan Cole stood near the bench, phone still in hand, watching the newsfeed explode in real time, millions of views, captions screaming "Judge Naomi Ellis reclaims her court" across every network. The story had already left the building, but its reckoning was just arriving. The lead bureau agent stepped forward, calm and clipped. "Your Honor, oversight is present. Officer Harding and his unit are being detained outside. We request your direction." End quote. Naomi Ellis rose from the bench with quiet authority. "You already know what to do. Proceed by the book they ignored." The agent nodded once. "Understood." From beyond the chamber doors, the sound of handcuffs clicking echoed faintly. The crowd in the gallery gasped, craning to see through the glass. Harding was led through the marble hall, shoulders hunched, eyes down, stripped of the swagger that had once fueled his cruelty. Naomi didn't look at him. She didn't have to. Power didn't need revenge. It required order. She turned to the courtroom clerk. "Record the date, the hour, and the cause. Violation of judicial dignity and abuse of authority under color of law." The clerk's voice trembled as he read it back. "Violation, under color of law. Recorded, Your Honor." Naomi exhaled softly. "Good. Then justice has found its witness." A murmur spread through the courtroom, relief, disbelief, awe. Even the seasoned journalists were too stunned to speak. The woman they'd just seen shoved on the courthouse steps now commanded an entire federal chamber with poise that could silence earthquakes. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Judge, the Bureau wants to know if you'd like to suspend the rest of today's docket." Naomi's eyes flicked toward the empty jury box. "No, we continue. Justice doesn't cancel itself because someone tried to silence it." He nodded, almost smiling. "Understood." 17. Through the tall windows, the world was still watching. Hundreds of people crowded the plaza, phones raised, waiting for another glimpse of the woman who had turned humiliation into precedent. Naomi addressed the gallery, her tone even but resonant. "Let this serve as a reminder. Authority exists to protect, not to intimidate. The law does not bend to fear, or pride, or prejudice. Not while I sit here." In this sected, a woman in the audience, the young law student who had filmed the first slap, began to cry quietly. Her friend squeezed her hand. Naomi's gaze found them. "What you did out there," she said gently, "matters. Every lens, every witness, every voice that refused to look away, that is how change begins. Not through power, but through presence." Ethan cleared his throat, emotion edging his voice. "Judge, the governor's office is on line 1. They want to issue a formal statement." 2. "Tell them to wait," she replied without hesitation. The people outside just gave theirs. The courtroom erupted in soft applause, restrained, respectful, but carrying the tremor of something larger than ceremony. Naomi's eyes glistened briefly, though she never lost composure. Cassandra's voice came through her earpiece. "Ma'am, confirmation received. Officer Harding has been suspended pending federal indictment. The footage is now public record." Naomi nodded slightly. Then archive it under one title, When Silence Spoke Louder Than Violence. She turned back toward the bench, resting her hand on the gavel once more. The weight of it no longer felt heavy, it felt rightful. Court remains in session, she declared. Outside, thunder rolled distant, approving, as if the sky itself had decided to stand witness. In that sound, the crowd heard what they'd been waiting for, not vengeance, but restoration. The system hadn't just punished a man, it had corrected its own blindness. And as Naomi Ellis stood beneath the seal of justice carved above her head, the building that once rejected her finally felt like what it was meant to be hers. By the time the sun began to fade behind the courthouse pillars, the crowd outside had grown quiet. Reporters no longer shouted questions, they just watched. The marble plaza that had witnessed humiliation that morning now stood as the stage of redemption. Naomi Ellis stepped out through the courthouse doors, no escort, no flashing lights, only the same calm presence that had carried her through the chaos. The golden light touched her coat, making it glow faintly against the stone. Cameras lifted again, but this time, no one shouted her name. They waited. She stopped at the top of the steps, looking down at the sea of faces, young, old, black, white, all holding their breath for whatever came next. Then she spoke. "I didn't raise my voice today," she began, her tone low but carrying. "I didn't need to, because dignity doesn't shout, it stands." Every word felt deliberate, weighted with grace and gravity. "When I walked into this courthouse, I came as a citizen. When I left that bench, I did so as a reminder that justice isn't a favor, it's a right." A hush swept through the plaza. The young law student who had filmed the first slap wiped tears from her cheeks. Somewhere in the crowd, Ethan Cole stood among them, no longer the prosecutor, just a man witnessing something larger than law. Naomi continued, her voice firm. "Today wasn't about power, it was about memory, about every door that ever closed on someone who belonged inside it, about every uniform that forgot who it was meant to protect." She looked straight into the cameras now, not with anger, but clarity. "Let this footage remind every officer, every judge, every citizen. Justice is not a weapon, it's a mirror. And today, it reflected all of us." The plaza erupted in applause, not wild, but reverent. It rolled across the marble steps like a slow tide, steady and deep. Naomi lowered her gaze for a moment, then smiled faintly. "If there's one thing I hope you remember from this day," she said, "it's this. I didn't win, we did. Because truth doesn't belong to one person, it belongs to whoever dares to stand for it." She turned then, walking down the same steps where the slap had landed hours earlier. Only now, each footfall sounded like closure, soft, sure, victorious. At the bottom, a small girl reached out and handed her a single white rose. Naomi knelt slightly, accepted it, and whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart." As she rose again, the crowd parted in silence, letting her pass. For a moment, the city itself seemed to pause, sirens hushed, traffic stilled as if to acknowledge the simple truth unfolding before them. Justice doesn't need permission to arrive. It only needs someone brave enough to stand still. And on that day, Judge Naomi Ellis did exactly that.